Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Richard Gere, here as well. And we got a subject here that's kind of near and dear to my heart, but even more near and dear based on, after Doug's just got done through Cozumel and going down through some Mayan ruins. And we're going to talk about pyramids and Tower of Babel and just all kinds of fun stuff, maybe craters. And I don't know, Doug, let's have some fun today. You know? Yeah, what's the title of the show tonight?
The title of the show is Chichen Itza, which is a Mayan ruin that I visited on Christmas Eve this year.
Yep.
And we went on a cruise over the Christmas holidays, and we stopped in Cozumel. I took a pretty rough boat ride across the from the to the mainland from the island, and I got seasick.
See, I actually like those. I never get seasick. Yeah, I just don't have a problem with it. I like rough boat rides.
But it's about a 2-hour bus drive to the site from there.
Is it? Okay, because it's about what they said, about 120 kilometers is what they said. It's about 80 miles or so, or 85 miles to the place. So how was the temperature down? How was the weather down there?
It was 85 to 90.
Oh, that would have been tough for me to take. Oh, especially with we had some bad. That was the bad couple of weeks of snow. It was pretty nice this Christmas week, but
so we had a beautiful time. But this is a place that ever since I was like in 5th grade, when I read a science series book that I used to subscribe to, these science books that come every month.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
And this one had was about the Mayan ruins and the discovery, I think it was 1841, of these Mayan ruins. And since then, there have been over 7,000 different sites that have been discovered.
Are they pretty much all Mayan, or are they Incan, Aztec, or Toltec? I mean, I'm never quite get all that straight, and there's a lot of different branches there. You know?
And I asked the guide about this. These are actually Toltec ruins. They conquered the Mayans, and these date from the period of time from about 900 AD to 1600 AD, something like that.
When the Spaniards came in.
Right, when the Spaniards came in. And by about 1400, they were pretty much in decline, from what I understand.
When were the Mayan ruins? When did that? So they were conquered. What's time? Were they Mayan in the 900s, and then the Toltecs came in later?
The Toltecs came in later, and
do you know what time period that? Maybe
I think that the architecture, though, is mostly Toltec.
Oh, really? So what did the Mayans do? What do they have in there? Do you know?
I think I don't really understand what the differences were, but the religion and the ceremonies were pretty interesting, because they were
pretty bloody.
Yeah, they're pretty pagan. They demanded human sacrifice, and you had multiple gods. But we as creationists believe is that these are people who emigrated shortly after the Nimrod.
The Tower of Babel times,
Tower of Babel, and you see these ziggurats, these pyramid structures in quite a number of different places.
Yeah, for those who are not familiar, a ziggurat, spelled with a Z, it's not a cigarette. Okay, it's a stepped pyramid. In fact, most people think that's what the Tower of Babel really was a stepped pyramid. The Egyptians actually modified it with a straight-sided pyramid, but that's kind of an anomaly. Most pyramids in the ancient world were stepped, and even in the first pyramid, one of the first ones, I can't think of the name of it offhand, was a stepped pyramid. It was, and then they modified that. But I've always thought it fascinating. It's interesting. The secular world, or the secular, never seemed to put, at least I've not read it, that there was a relationship between the peoples here in the New World and the people in the old world. It's like suddenly, it's like independently they come up with doing megalithic structures
Right.
that look like this, very similar to many things. I mean, they have their own modifications as well. They had the ramps that go down the sides of them, which was kind of interesting. But they were still the megalithic, pyramidic type of structure. And I've always felt, just as you were just saying, that this is really remembrances from the Tower of Babel. But the interesting, Doug, about it, and I want to go through, because the Tower of Babel is like, a couple thousand years, 2300 BC or so, 2100 BC. And so you talk about 2,000 years, and then another 700 at least before they start get to the New World.
Right.
So that's like 2,500 years or so between the Tower of Babel and these structures being built, as I understand it, based on what they're saying. Now, again, when you're dealing with datings and times, there's always a caveat that none of us were there. There isn't something in the stone that says, okay, 600 AD,
Right.
or CE, or whatever time
It
thing
is something that they
you know.
have to estimate based upon patinas and ruins and that sort of thing.
And it can be pretty good, I think, for, as long as you take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I'm going, there's this long period of time, Doug, so I'm wondering, did they talk, well, they probably wouldn't have, but your ideas as far as like emigration from the Tower of Babel, which was in the plains of Shinar, Mesopotamian region, to the time they got over here. We've read some other books, we've talked about it, Ice Age civilizations, Doug, and things of that nature,
Right.
where these megalithic civilizations were coming all over the world. In fact, every time you seem to find another new discovery of Atlantis, it's probably one of these megalithic things that were built during the Ice Age period of time, and then the waters melted and covered it up to 300 feet, 300 or so feet, usually is where it's at. But you get places like this that were built on mountaintops
Right.
and high ground, and so it seems to be a little bit later as far as when they were built. But it's fascinating stuff, Doug.
Right, and one of the things that I noticed is right off is that this is all about the worship of the serpent.
Yeah.
And all of the structures around the temples and the ziggurats had these serpent heads sticking out of it. And there was another place that was called the Place of the Skulls. Apparently, after the human was sacrificed, their skulls were put on display, and in this particular place.
Well, so you're talking about a game they played where you described the game as the loser. The loser, you didn't want to lose that game.
Right, the loser was sacrificed to the gods.
They were beheaded, right?
Beheaded, yeah. And the game was a ball court. There's a ball court where there's some on the sides of the walls of the ball court. It's about 27 feet up in the air. There's a circle, a huge circle. It's probably, I think it's about 8 feet in diameter. Now, when I saw this in the books when I was a kid, I didn't realize, the size of these.
How big it was? Now you say 8 feet. That's the external diameter, right?
External
'Cause what's
diameter,
the
about 3 feet in the in the middle. So there's
Okay.
a hole in the middle where
Okay.
the ball was supposed to go through, and you.
And how did they do this?
Well,
it was played like soccer, right?
It was played like soccer. You cannot use your hands to get a. You have to kick the ball or hit the ball.
Now we have
somehow.
pretty good evidence for this, as I understand, because obviously the Spaniards recorded. I mean, they were still playing these games when they were conquered by the Spaniards.
Well, I don't think that's the case.
No, then how do they know?
It's in the carvings and
Okay, all right.
in the side of the wall.
And that shows how the game was played.
Shows how the game was played, and it also shows the sacrifice that took place at the end.
Was there any? Do they know what the rules are of the game besides the guy gets killed if he loses? I mean, obviously you got to get ball in the hole, but
Right.
how?
Obviously, you want to get as many balls in the hole as you
Was
can.
it pretty much a free for all?
Yeah, it was, apparently.
Okay, so there was no like rules where you can't do this or that. You pretty much could do whatever you want to get the ball in there. Is that what
Right,
it was?
yeah.
Okay, that's what I was curious about, whether they could get actually rules, which is from the carvings. But that aside, but you realize this was a society, Doug. When you talk about, let's go back to the serpent thing. I've always felt, the serpent obviously is a sign for biblical truths for the devil.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
dragon, the serpent, that devil, Lucifer and the devil. And I look at how things get topsy-turvy when you lose sight of the true God.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt, and I don't have any proof of this, Doug, and I'm just going to throw this out in the audience, you can take it or leave it, but there was one of the god of the underworld, which is where we think of like hell or Hades in Egypt, and his name was Set.
Right.
Guess who that name is? That was the son of Adam.
Mm-hmm.
We pronounce it Seth, but TH was a hard T.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one that called on the name of the Lord.
Right.
So the bad guy is really, from our perspective, is the good guy.
Right, yeah.
And conversely, the God we would think is the devil and the evil, they're worshiping.
Mm-hmm.
This is where everything gets gets backward and upside down. By the way, sometimes I feel like that's the way this country, there's an old thing I used to see on TV when we were at night. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord.
Right.
But when you abandon those principles, then bad becomes good and good becomes bad, and that's when you have problems. And sometimes it takes, God is very forbearing, but he will let us run with that kind of rebellion, but it will always seem to have consequences. And the violence and the death and the destruction, the Mayans, their society was going downward anyway, but, what caused it to go down, Doug? I mean, besides the fact,
if you look at it, you actually have a lot of, I wouldn't call it civilization, but it's more advanced technology that's
it's an
going on
organized
here.
society anyway, yeah.
And they had a calendar which was 18 months of 20 days, and then they have 5 days left over.
Oh,
And
okay.
apparently the 5 days that were left over were supposed to be unlucky. But
Okay.
but
So they stayed in their home those days, huh?
calendar itself, the way that they organized it, is actually a little bit more accurate than our calendar.
Really?
And like I remember reading about this as a kid, that the accuracy of our calendar is 365.242,500.
It's like 365 plus, there's like a quarter of a day or something.
Yeah,
isn't it?
242,500.
Yeah,
Now,
okay.
sidereal time, which is what's measured by the accurate clocks that we have, measures it as 365.242198. Now,
Okay.
the Mayan calendar was 365.242129.
Really? Wow,
And
that's
so it's almost right on. in
yeah,
terms
that's
of-
amazing.
And I guess this is the way that they adjust the dates in terms of leap years and things like that to make it more accurate.
Well, the thing about it is that even though we sometimes it sounds like we're castigating these civilizations, we're not doing it because we're thinking that they're stupid or wrong. But it's just that we feel that when you get things backward, it eventually has consequences. I mean, it's not that you can't have high degrees of technology or high degrees of even advanced thing, but the violence and the disregard for human life, which is, by the way, I see a lot of that here in our culture.
Oh,
I've seen that
we
beginning
have
to
our
happen.
own human sacrifices. That
Yeah,
take
we
place.
do. But
And that's, and you have to ask the question: why do you get callous to that? How did the cultures end up worshiping a God that's so mean that?
it's like when I watch some of these movies, and these guys are following off this evil guy, and if you make one mistake, he shoots you, and I go, why do you want to follow a guy like that? And it just seems like really, we have a very kind of perverse, sick kind of mentality that we seem to gravitate to that, and that to me, Doug, it begs the question, why do you disbelieve that we live in a fallen world? Because why would you ever want to go for something that's just destructive like that?
Now, what's interesting
but we do.
also is that there's actually some disputes between the people who are researching the hieroglyphs on these things.
Okay.
They actually thought that it was the captain of the winning team that got sacrificed.
Oh, really? And they've recently come to the point where it's not the
There's debate between people whether it's the winning team or the losing team that got sacrificed.
So we don't really know how to read their hieroglyphs, or do we?
It's something that the Mayans have their own language, and the Mayan culture is still around.
Right, so they know what their language was about then. Okay.
But because this was so long ago, you can't really tell from what those on the inscriptions what actually was going on.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. But you can actually read the words. They know how the language works,
right,
and they can translate. Yeah, because Mayan, we still have Mayans today. It's not like they're gone. I don't know. Do we have Toltecs today? Are they still? I know there are still Aztecs. Aztecs still. I had remember Doug. We used to we like to go to Mexican restaurants. Sometimes Mexico to go, and one of the gals was the wife of the owner, whatever, and she was Aztec. Mm-hmm. And I went, really? Wow, that's kind of interesting. So I just was curious because there's something very exotic about the South America, Central America, and even Mexico. The Indians there. We know our North American brethren pretty well. The Comanche and Apache and Potawatomi and Cherokee, and we know the ones here, Ojibwa and all the ones here in Michigan. But even though there's a lot of mysterious stuff in that stuff, but down there it's really kind of exotic.
I asked Felipe, who was a Mayan guide that took us there, about the Olmec people, and he said, Olmec, I can tell you about that. They were the people, the ancient people who were there far before any of these other peoples came to this country, and they were actually they actually looked Negroid and raised.
Oh, they kind of know what they look like then, huh?
Yeah, there is Olmec type of carvings that depict these peoples.
Were they the ones that did the Nazca lines, or was that somebody else?
Those are Incas.
Those are Incas. Yeah, that's Inca. I thought it was a tribe before the Incas that did them.
Well, yeah, but it's more
precursor, more South American.
South American.
Okay.
Then.
Yeah.
And so often the question is, how do these peoples get to these areas? So. And they have them always marching across the Bering Strait.
Oh yeah.
And I think, as if they don't have boats, big old boats to take them over there.
And I think for the audience to understand, we're not. At least I don't dispute the fact that migration did come across the Bering Strait to some extent, but I don't believe that that's the only way they got over here. I think they came from the other side, from the Atlantic side, come in. They migrated down. I think they came over in boats. Kon-Tiki, the guy Thor Heyerdahl, I think isn't that the guy? Showed that you could get. They could do these little boats. They could make them. They could sail across the Pacific Ocean, and these were pretty smart to build these temples the way they did it. In fact, Doug, some of these things, I don't know if it's the Mayan ruins, but there's some of these cities where you have boulders that are 200 tons, and they fit them together, and they're different shapes. Well, you can't even get a piece of paper between the cracks. They're so well joined and fit together. We don't really have the technology to move 200 ton. Maybe we do now. Maybe we do have it, but I've read that we don't have machinery that can lift things that heavy. 200 ton. So how do these, quote, primitive societies do it? And that's always some speculative fun too as well.
Then you have the people who speculate, well, these are all ancient UFO.
Ancient aliens.
Yeah.
But then there's other ones that go, which sounds almost just as crazy, but I think it has some basis in possibility that we're able to move things with sound. They're able to figure out how to move things. We've talked about that over the years, but it's all speculative. We don't really know. There's no evidence in the hieroglyphs or the writings or the traditions that tells you how they did some of this stuff. At least I know of, but they did it. It's there.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what I saw.
Yeah, tell us what. Tell, man.
And we can talk about the El Castillo, which is the pyramid itself.
That's the big deal.
And what's interesting about that is that there's an entrance down to it actually represents I think it's like 365 steps going up, so it matches where the.
It's like a whole calendar on this thing. 365. They also had 52 I was reading it just a second ago, but it was like everything is designed: the solar, the year, the days, the weeks, and it
So
was
these
very
were
fascinating. You know.
these were all about studying the signs of the
Yes.
heavens. And, you know, we have scriptures that tell us don't be dismayed about the signs of the heavens, because that's not what controls things. It is God who is the creator of these things, and it's not the heavens themselves that are to be worshipped.
Interesting, Doug, because that, again, seems to be a holdover from the Babylonian or the Tower of Babel.
Exactly.
Which seems to be an occultic, astrological type of worship center. And isn't that interesting that this would have the same kind of thing?
Yeah.
And this is the one where they worship the serpent god.
Right.
So yeah, that the whole seed of these kinds of occultic
Now
practices
there is an entrance
continue on there. So
underneath the area where the steps are, where you can actually enter inside of it.
Right.
And inside of the pyramid is actually another pyramid.
oh really?
Yeah, and
That's
so that's
interesting.
where the carvings of the different gods were.
Now this was not a tomb like it was in Egypt, right?
I don't know if we know that for sure.
We don't
but,
know. Okay.
But
Right.
also, there was another temple called the Temple of Warriors. And you could see that sort of off in the distance. We didn't actually get near that particular one. But
Okay.
there's all these different columns that stick up. They go on and on and on and on for quite a distance. And apparently there was they were probably covered at one point in time with a roof. But,
Like a superstructure or
yeah.
a thing over. Okay. Yeah.
But this was also another temple, and there was a up at the top of it was the god Chak, I guess it was called.
What's that?
C-H-A-C.
That's a god.
Yeah, that's one of the gods. It's a weather
Check
god.
or ka. Or,
And
okay.
it's sort of like, it looks like a reclining figure of some sort.
Okay.
And so that's you know what I saw. There were about 7 or 8 of these different structures that you could see.
How big of an area are we talking about, Doug? This didn't cover.
Well, maybe 3,000 acres or something.
Oh wow,
like that.
that's pretty good. Okay. So and how many people probably did this house in its heyday? Probably.
They say it might have housed 200,000 people.
Well, that's a pretty good size building.
So
yeah.
this was quite a city, and
Doug, was it famine, weather changes, droughts? Did something cause the civilizations or these things to? Why did these things just suddenly go down? Do they know? Have any idea?
I don't think that they know
Okay.
very much about it,
Did
because
the Mayans themselves talk about it? I mean, they must have some kind of traditions, no? You didn't get into it, huh?
I didn't get into it.
Yeah,
no,
that stuff that fascinates me. I'm always curious if they have any
and
legends
when
or
you
stories.
look it up online, it really doesn't tell you that
Yeah.
much about it. You know, we only know what we can sort of figure out from what the ruins tell us. I asked him also about another thing that I remember reading, because it was sort of a funny spelling of this place. It's called Dzibilchelten, and it's spelled Dzibilchaltun. And at first he didn't understand me, and then I wrote it down for him. He said, "Oh yes, I've been there." And
How does he pronounce it?
It's a little bit different than what I just said. But,
Yeah. Okay. We won't try. We won't. Okay.
But anyway, what he said about it was that this was a spot where you could line up the equinox. The sun would shine right in this particular spot.
Almost like those Indiana Jones things, you know?
Oh yeah, exactly like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And Dzibilchelten was right near Chicxulub, which is the crater in the Yucatan, which is supposed to have killed all
the
the
dinosaurs.
But I guess at that point you can see some of the different terrain geology that might have formed at that time. But this culture is fascinating to study, but it is also a little bit frightening to consider the massive amounts of evil that took place.
Yeah.
Actually, when Cortez conquered them and destroyed them, but he probably did them a favor.
I know, it's totally tough. We raise it a lot today, especially in our political world today. It's a lot of white man guilt, but man, these civilizations were not all that great. They did some great stuff, but they were very violent, bloody. I mean, it's like they killed their best people. And I never understand how a society can really thrive when you kill your best people off.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was a violent. I'm not saying everything they did was violent, but what we have and what we see was, and that they got taken over so easily by Cortez and Pizarro and the rest of the conquistadors. Not trying to laud the Spanish, conquistadors so much, but there's two sides of the story. There's a reason, that the ruthlessness of it was probably in no small part to the fact of the way these people actually were themselves. Although, I mean, we get the idea
you
that
talk about the decline of their culture.
Yeah.
You see that in many different cultures. Is that when over a period of time they just continue to add pile evil upon evil, and eventually that catches up
It always
with
does.
civilization and it destroys it.
And I don't know why we never, all these years, thousands of years, Doug, it's like in the Old Testament, you read how the Jews and things, they would rebel, they'd come to God, and then they'd backslide. But Doug, that was a world where the Holy Spirit was not really manifest like it is today. There's going to be a bigger judgment to pay today. This is a world that's post Christ coming 2,000 years. The Holy Spirit's been in this world for this long, and we still reject Him.
And we think this has something to do with, and it helps us understand the biblical point of view that the Bible talks about civilizations of this sort where they had high places.
Right. Oh yeah.
Where they would.
This is a high place.
This is a high place where you tried to reach the stars, to worship the stars, and to appease these gods who bring the bad weather or good weather, or based upon what they think.
Whatever whim,
and you have these capricious gods you got to please in some way or another. That's really no way to live, but the remedy for that is Jesus Christ and His
set you free
gospel.
from all of that stuff, and set you free from all the bondage of trying to set up high places in your own heart as well.
Right.
Doug, because that's what we do it all the time. We're trying to be like God without God. That's the sin of Adam.
Yeah.
We want to be autonomous beings, and we are the creation, not the creator, and that's the difference.
We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.